The story of Europe begins not with a map, but with a myth. In ancient Greece, a beautiful princess named Europa played by the sea. Zeus, king of the gods, saw her and was captivated. Disguising himself as a magnificent white bull, Zeus approached Europa and her friends. The girls, charmed by the gentle bull, decorated its horns with flowers. Europa climbed onto its back. Suddenly, the bull charged into the sea, carrying Europa far from her home. They crossed the waves to Crete, where Zeus revealed his true form. Europa became his consort and had sons who became legendary kings, including Minos of Crete. The Greeks named the new land after her, Europe. This myth gave the continent its name, tying it to a story of abduction and a journey across the sea. The Greeks saw their land as central, with Asia to the east and Europe to the west. Some scholars think the name Europa may come from ancient words for mainland or broad face. But it's the story of the princess and the bull that has endured for millennia. The myth reflects how the Greeks imagined their world, full of wonder, boundaries, and new beginnings. Europe's name is rooted in both legend and geography. The tale reminds us that the continent's identity began as a story, not a border, and that story still shapes how we see Europe today. The Greeks were the first to use Europe as a place on a map. They divided the world into three: Asia, Libya, Africa, and Europe, the mysterious north and west. Early Greek writers like Hecataeus drew maps with Europe separated from Asia by the Turkish Straits. For them, Europe was just a region, not a culture. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote about Europe and Asia as opposing worlds. Europe stood for freedom and law, Asia for powerful empires. This was the start of Europe as an idea, not just a place, but their Europe was small. Mostly Greece, Italy, and the northern Mediterranean. The rest was unknown, filled with legends of Hyperboreans and Celts. Places like Germany and Russia were blank spaces. The Greek idea of Europe was foggy, waiting for history to fill in the details. Over time, the concept grew as explorers and writers learned more. Europe's identity began as a vague outline on a map. It would take centuries for the idea to become real, but the Greeks planted the seed. The Romans built an empire around the Mediterranean, uniting lands we now call Europe. For them, the real divide was between the Roman world and the barbarians beyond. Inside the empire, cities, roads, law, and Latin. Outside, forests, tribes, and the unknown. The Rhine and Danube rivers marked the frontier. Roman soldiers guarded the borders, but trade and contact with Germanic, Slavic, and Celtic tribes was constant. Romans saw themselves as citizens of an empire, not as Europeans. Yet, by drawing these boundaries, they reinforced the idea of a separate Europe. When the empire weakened, the frontier collapsed. Barbarian groups like the Goths and Franks moved in, founding new kingdoms. This migration period mixed Roman and tribal cultures, laying the groundwork for modern nations. The legacy of Rome, roads, laws, languages, shaped Europe's future. The fall of Rome was chaotic, but it was also a new beginning. The peoples inside and outside the old empire blended, creating Europe's foundations. The Roman frontier became the border of a new world. After Rome's fall, Christianity became Europe's unifying force. The Church preserved learning and converted new rulers. A shared Christian identity, Christendom, emerged, binding diverse peoples. The rise of Islam in the south and east gave Europe a common other. The Battle of Tours in 732, where Charles Martel stopped a Muslim army, became a symbol of European unity. Charlemagne, crowned emperor in 800, was called the Father of Europe. His empire didn't last, but the idea of a united Christian Europe endured. Christendom inspired the Crusades and shaped the continent for centuries. Maps placed Jerusalem at the center, reflecting faith's importance. Europe was seen as a Christian family led by kings and the Pope. This religious identity held Europe together through the Middle Ages. Christendom defined Europe as much by belief as by geography. By the late Middle Ages, loyalty shifted from Christendom to nation. Kings centralized power, creating national armies and laws. The printing press spread local languages, building shared identities. Borders changed through wars and royal marriages. France, Spain, and the UK took shape. Some countries, like Germany and Italy, unified only in the 1800s. The 20th century brought world wars and the collapse of empires. New nations emerged: Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and more. The Cold War split Europe into East and West, symbolized by the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Soviet Union created even more countries: Ukraine, the Baltics, and others. Peaceful splits, like Czechoslovakia, and violent ones like Yugoslavia, redrew the map. Today's Europe is the result of centuries of shifting borders and identities. The continent's nations are young, shaped by conflict and change. Europe's map is a living record of its turbulent past. The first Europeans were ancient humans Neanderthals and later Homo sapiens. Neanderthals thrived as hunters in the Ice Age, but were joined and eventually replaced by modern humans. Early Europeans were nomadic hunter-gatherers, famous for cave art like that at Lascaux and Altamira. Around 9,000 years ago, farming arrived from the Middle East. The Neolithic Revolution let people settle, farm, and build villages. Populations grew, forests were cleared, and animals domesticated. Pottery, weaving, and new skills spread. Early farmers built megaliths, giant stone monuments like Stonehenge. These structures show organization and engineering skill. Farming slowly replaced hunting, but both ways of life coexisted for millennia. The shift to agriculture transformed society, economy, and landscape. Permanent settlements led to new forms of community and culture. The builders of Europe's first monuments left a legacy of mystery and wonder. Their achievements set the stage for later civilizations. Europe's story began with hunters, farmers, and builders. The continent's roots are deep and ancient. Even today, traces of these first Europeans remain. Their legacy is written in the land itself. After farming spread, Europe was shaped by migrations. The Yamnaya people from the steppes brought horses, carts, and the roots of Indo-European languages. Their arrival mixed with local farmers, creating the genetic and linguistic base for later groups. The Celts spread across Western Europe, the Germanic tribes settled in the north, and the Slavs expanded east and south. These migrations created the continent's main language families. The Celts dominated much of Europe before being pushed to the fringes by Romans and others. Germanic tribes played a key role in Rome's fall and Europe's transformation. The Slavs expanded from the forests of Eastern Europe, forming three main branches: West, South, and East Slavs. Over thousands of years, these movements created Europe's complex mosaic. Languages, cultures, and peoples blended and shifted. The continent's diversity is rooted in these ancient migrations. Europe's peoples are the product of constant movement and mixing. The story of Europe is a story of change. Today, Europe is a patchwork of peoples and cultures. The main language groups, Germanic, Romance, Slavic, and Celtic, still shape the continent. Germanic languages dominate the north and center, Romance languages the south and west, Slavic languages the east and Balkans. Celtic languages survive in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Brittany. Unique languages like Greek, Albanian, Hungarian, Finnish, and Estonian add to the mix. Religion has also shaped Europe. Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox traditions divide the continent. Jewish and, more recently, Muslim communities add further diversity. Recent migrations from Africa, Asia, and beyond have transformed cities into multicultural hubs. New Europeans bring languages, foods, and traditions, enriching the continent's fabric. Europe's culture is a living tapestry, woven from ancient and modern threads. Diversity is its defining feature. The continent's story is one of movement, mixing, and adaptation. Europe's identity is always evolving. Its strength lies in its variety. Europe is a continent of diversity and shared dreams. After 2 world wars, leaders sought unity through peace, not conquest. The European Economic Community began in the 1950s, growing into today's European Union. The EU unites 27 countries with a single market, shared laws, and, for many, a common currency. It's the most ambitious unity project in Europe's history. Yet national identities remain strong. People are French, Polish, or Irish first. The EU's path is not always smooth. Brexit showed unity is never guaranteed. To be European means balancing heritage and diversity. Europe's legacy includes philosophy, law, art, and conflict. Its diversity is found in languages, food, and traditions. Being European is living with the tension between local and shared identities. The story that began with a princess and a bull continues as Europe shapes its future. The continent's journey is far from over.